meeting. I also would like to thank ASG, Mr. Khalkhriari, for his briefing. Mr. President, 4-year-old Razan fought for as long as she could, but her body gave up and she died of malnutrition on Sunday. Yesterday, 6-year-old Yusuf died of starvation. He was among 15 people to starve to death in the last 24 hours in Gaza. Israel has ravaged Gaza. It has destroyed nearly everything in that narrow strip of Palestinian land. But nearly 2 million human beings remain, including 1 million children. They must be saved. Israel has destroyed everything, their lives, their homes, the mosques and the churches, the schools and the hospitals, the entire infrastructure of life, and even the cemeteries. But make no mistake, the real target is the 2 million Palestinians who remain in Gaza. For Israel, their destruction is required for its scheme to take over the land. The fact Netanyahu and his government are actively pursuing transforming Gaza into a land without a people through genocide and ethnic cleansing under the unconvincing disguise of voluntary migration has only been made possible by the impunity they enjoy. All of what is happening now was predictable, premeditated and planned. It is a criminal and cruel enterprise occurring openly for all to see. Do you know when was the first plan for so-called voluntary migration presented to the Israeli cabinet? 13th October 2023. Go back to what we said in this very chamber 20 months ago. We said this would be happening. It took tens of thousands of Palestinians killed for the world to acknowledge it. How many more need to die before getting the world to act to stop this genocide? Mr. President, in Gaza, starved journalists are reporting about starved health and humanitarian personnel trying to save the lives of starving infants and children and their starving families. People are dying of hunger and thirst by design or while desperately trying to get food or water by design. People are collapsing in the streets while being forcibly displaced yet again by design. People are being gunned down and murdered by Israeli soldiers for merely trying to get a bag of flour or lentils to feed their families, again by design. Every day now, we receive heart-wrenching messages from Gaza with few words. I am hungry. This is what our children are saying, and every individual in Gaza is saying, I am hungry. There is no food for my family. We are dying. Help us. What should we tell them? What should the Security Council tell them? That the whole world is against this starvation policy and yet it is worsening. That no one wants to see people in Gaza starving and yet the world watches on as they die of hunger and thirst. Should we read to them the strong statements issued or the resolutions adopted? What should we tell them? They hear of outrage, condemnation, pressure, and deals being made, but find no food to save their lives and the lives of their loved ones, or get shot to death while trying to reach it. They bury their sons and daughters every day. They grow thinner as their bodies eat away at them every day, wasting away, their struggle to survive more painful and more crushing every day. What should we tell them? That the negotiations for a ceasefire continue, and that in the meantime Israel has been given a right to massacre them and to deny them aid to life? Is that what international law stipulates? Is that what humanity dictates? What should we tell them? That this is the extent of what the world can do or is willing to do to save Palestinian lives? That the fact the perpetrators of these horrors are Israelis means they cannot be held to account? That there is aid at the borders and brave UN and humanitarian personnel ready to distribute this aid as they had done before, but we cannot get Israel to open the crossings and allow the aid to be distributed without killing those distributing it or those receiving it. What is our collective plan to actually save lives? What is being done now that could actually stop this horror? That is the only measure that matters. Are we doing what is necessary to save the millions of lives at risk? Are we upholding our legal, political, humanitarian, moral, and human obligations? And the answer is absolutely clear: we are not. So which one is it? Are Palestinian lives not worth saving? Or does Israeli supremacy extend as far as conferring upon Israel a right of life and death over the Palestinian people as a whole? Mr. President, it is now for every state to determine where it stands at this historical juncture. Every single country will be asked, what did you do during this genocide? Not what you said or what you considered doing, but what did you actually do? What did you do to stop it and stop the destruction of human life? There is no time to waste and no place for self-inflicted powerlessness. Countries have tools they need to use, nationally and collectively, to bring the genocide to an end. Ask yourselves, did we do everything possible? And I assure you, it is impossible to say yes. We call for a coalition of the willing to take every action necessary now to end the genocide, to uphold international law and save what is left of our humanity under the rubble in Gaza, and end the occupation and conflict. A year ago, the ICJ adopted a landmark opinion on ending the unlawful presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory that spelled out in no uncertain terms the obligations of Israel and, as importantly, the obligations of third parties. You. Any state claiming to be a law-abiding state must take action to comply with this opinion and ensure it moves away from complicity and contributes to accountability. The General Assembly called over a month ago upon all member states to individually and collectively advance accountability and take all measures necessary in line with international law and the Charter of the United Nations to ensure compliance by Israel, the occupying power, with its obligations. Since the adoption of that resolution, more than 3,000 Palestinians were killed, the majority women and children. States must act now to stop these atrocities. I represented the state of Palestine at the meeting of the Hague Group in Bogota, Colombia, where countries came together and adopted concrete measures to halt the genocide and advance accountability. This is an important step in the right direction. Several of the countries represented here have also announced concrete steps and initiatives to the same effect. But much more needs to be done, and fast. The commitment is good by some, but it's not sufficient. We need more from all of you. Within days, not weeks, and certainly not months, we are out of time, because every day we fail to act, children are killed, starved, orphaned, burned, disabled, and traumatized. Families are shattered, life is destroyed. Red lines are useless if they can be crossed over and over again without consequences. Rules are worthless if we are not willing to sanction their breacher. Words are meaningless if they are not followed by action. We need you to act, and act now. Of course, it is better to speak out rather than stay silent, but speaking out cannot be an alternative to action, especially when it is evident Israel is not listening and becoming only more brutal, only more dangerous. And we should not pretend we are not hearing what Israel is saying or not seeing what it is doing. Netanyahu, Katz, Saar, Smotrich, and Ben Gvir are clear. They say there are no innocent people in Gaza. They call our children children of darkness. They call our people human animals and have been acting accordingly. They spoke of inflicting death and destruction on all of Gaza, and they did. They are confessing to their own crimes and are committing them in plain sight for all to see. 7 decades of impunity make them confident they have no reason to hide their intentions or actions. Mr. President, we warn against all those who try to portray this conflict as a religious conflict, including those who do so to shield Israel from criticism and condemnation. This is not a conflict between Jews and Muslims. It is a war against Palestinian presence in the land of Palestine. Palestinian Christians are not spared, from Gaza to Taiba, from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. The Israeli strike against the Holy Family Church is not the first of its kind. By the way, this is the church that the late Pope Francis used to call every day. The historic Greek Orthodox Church of Saint Porphyrius in Gaza was bombed in the early days of the war, as was the great Omari Mosque. 2 Palestinian women were shot and killed on the grounds of the Holy Family Church back in December 2023. Settlers' terror attacks are about forcibly displacing Palestinian communities regardless of their faith and about stealing their land. Christians are harassed, attacked, and beaten like their Muslim brothers and sisters. When trying to celebrate their holy days, priests and nuns report attacks against them and the church properties. They are spat on, insulted, and threatened by Israeli extremists. This is not a conflict between Jews and Muslims. The diversity of our people reflects the diversity of this land and its rich history and its significance for all monotheistic religions. And the solidarity movement with Palestine is comprised of people of all nationalities and all faiths, coming together against injustice, against occupation and apartheid, against oppression and genocide. And it includes Israelis who care about justice, but also about Israel and its future. And they know that the path on which Israel has embarked, by which it thinks it can impose its will on the region through bullets and bombs and expects surrender than peace, is reckless and wrong and will lead to devastating effects for the region and the world. Mark my words, Israel's genocide in Gaza will redefine the region and our world for generations to come. And what we do next will determine in what way. Let me repeat that. Mark my words. Israel's genocide in Gaza will redefine the region and our world for generations to come. And what we do next will determine in what way. Mr. President, an alternative path is possible if we act now, where life is restored in Gaza, where freedom for the Palestinian people is achieved, where Palestinians and Israelis can live in shared space and security, and where the region as a whole can experience peace, stability, and prosperity. This path of just and lasting peace, upholding international law and based on the relevant UN resolutions and the fulfillment of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including self-determination and the realization of their right to their independent state, and the implementation of the two-state solution, with Palestine and Israel living side by side in peace and security. This is the only path forward. It requires the mobilization of all states to advance freedom and justice leading to peace and security. The international conference to be convened by Saudi Arabia and France at the end of this month offers a unique opportunity to transform international law and the international consensus into an achievable plan and to demonstrate resolve to end the occupation and conflict once and for all, for the benefit of all peoples and of all the states of the region. That is the path that must be taken with courage and commitment and without delay. Mr. President, it all starts with Gaza, with the children of Gaza. For now, history will remember us all for the lives we failed to save. But many more lives remain to be saved. Let us not fail them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Permanent Observer of the Observer State of Palestine, for your statement. I will now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe this chamber and the UN would benefit from something basic, a full and honest overview of the current state of our region. Let's begin in Gaza, where Hamas continues with its deprived tactics. 50 innocent people remain held hostage. Israel has been working tirelessly to bring them home. We have made compromise after compromise, crossing lines no other nation would consider. But Hamas has rejected each and every offer. Even as we speak, we receive rejections from Hamas. For Hamas, the suffering of its own people is their greatest weapon. The longer the misery continues, the longer they can feed it into their propaganda machine. I am sure that all of you will address the humanitarian situation. But I will remind you, you all must focus your pressure where it belongs, on Hamas. They are the ones who are saying no to the offer. If you don't believe me, you can ask the US, Qatar, Egypt, the ones who are trying to negotiate. They are rejecting every offer. In Lebanon, the new government has made promising statements about reform, and we are listening. But Hezbollah is busy attempting to rearm and reassert itself in southern Lebanon and Beirut. We have seen this movie before. We know how it ends. Israel will never allow this to happen. We will not permit Hezbollah to rebuild its terror infrastructure on our northern border. In Iran, the genocidal regime that spent 12 days launching missiles at Israeli civilians is trying to restart its nuclear program. Since today we have the so-called privilege of the presence of Deputy Foreign Minister Rabadbi here today, so let me ask him directly, what is your plan now? Will you continue with your murderous agenda? Will you keep running toward a nuclear bomb? Will you keep expending your ballistic missiles for attacks on civilians? Will you keep pumping money into your terrorist proxies? You don't need to answer, because we already know it. Now is the time for action. Sanctions must not be lifted, they must be imposed now, on the regime's economy, on its terror network, on its ballistic missile program, and on the individual leaders who sit in Tehran and plot murder as their foreign policy. In Syria, jihadist forces have traveled south of Damascus to the Druze city of Suwaida, where they have committed unimaginable atrocities. Hundreds of innocent men, women, and children now lie dead. I have personally received hundreds of calls from my Druze friends from Israel, terrified and horrified by what is happening to their people. Their family ties cross the border. Their brothers and sisters live both in Suwaida and in Israel. For us, this is personal. It is Israel's sacred moral duty to stand by our Druze brothers and sisters in their time of need. We are guided by our unshakable moral compass. We will not stand idly by while innocent minorities are slaughtered, just kilometers away from their Israeli family members. So yes, the Middle East today is embroiled in chaos, but is also filled with opportunity. There is chaos for the innocent hostages still trapped in Hamas's tunnels. Chaos for the civilians and minorities in Lebanon and Syria still facing terror. Chaos for the entire region as Iran continues to push the world to the edge. But there is also opportunity, because the forces of darkness have been weakened. Hamas has lost much of its terror infrastructure and its senior leadership. Hezbollah was crippled by Israel's operations last year. Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs have been set back in ways that were once thought impossible. Israel is making the Middle East safer for everyone who values peace and calm. In other words, we are doing the work of the United Nations. While Israel dismantles terror networks and protects innocent lives, what does the UN do? It clings to its political agenda. It protects its bias. It defends the agencies that have long abandoned neutrality. You don't need to look far to see this bias in action. Just look at the statements and conduct of Tom Fletcher and his agency, OCHA. Too often, Mr. Fletcher has forgotten or decided to ignore that his statements have consequences. He has repeatedly abandoned his sacred responsibility to act without bias, choosing instead to fuel a political campaign against Israel. Several weeks ago, Mr. Fletcher claimed that 14,000 babies in Gaza would starve to death within 48 hours. That statement was false. It was baseless. While he quietly walked it back, the damage had already been done. But with another lie, Mr. Fletcher has not walked back: the accusation that Israel is committing genocide. He knows it's not true. He knows it. There are facts, international law, you have to prove intention. Yet he said it anyway. That word carries more weight than any other accusation. To use it falsely is to dishonor the memory of real genocide victims and to endanger more lives by fueling hatred. It is not too late to correct the record. Israel demands that Mr. Fletcher retract his statement, publicly, unequivocally, and immediately. But this is no longer just about one official's reckless remarks. His responsibility has infected OCHA from top to bottom. Let's start with the data. On May 6, OCHA published figures claiming to show civilian casualties in Gaza. Officially, just 2 days later, those figures were reduced by over 10,000. Not by 1, not by 10, not by 100, and not by 1,000, by 10,000. Just like that. No explanation, no accountability, just a quiet adjustment. No, 10,000 less. As if the original numbers weren't already plastered across headlines worldwide. OCHA has built its reports almost exclusively on data from Hamas-run institutions. There is no independent verification, no cross-checking, no effort to distinguish between civilians and terrorists. Every casualty is listed as a civilian. This violates the UN's own standards in every other conflict. But when it comes to Israel, those standards disappear. At the same time, OCHA has actively undermined Israel's humanitarian efforts in Gaza. It tracks only UN-coordinated aid while ignoring the thousands of trucks of food, medical supplies, and fuel that Israel, the private sector, and other partners have delivered. OCHA has undercounted over 13,000 trucks. That's a deliberate choice to misrepresent reality. Perhaps most disturbing, Israel has uncovered clear evidence of Hamas affiliation within OCHA's ranks. So when you combine all of that with Mr. Fletcher's repeated falsehoods, you are not looking at a humanitarian agency, you are looking at a propaganda machine. I have said many times before, Israel believes in humanitarian work. We are committed to helping civilians, to protecting innocents, and to ensuring aid reaches those who need it. But we will not work with organizations that have chosen politics over principles. Mr. Fletcher has made it clear that OCHA is no longer a neutral agency. Israel is therefore left with no choice but to act. Today, I announce that Israel will take steps to ensure that what has been happening with OCHA will no longer continue. Hundreds of OCHA employees are undergoing security vetting. Key employees will not have their permits renewed following clear evidence of strong affiliation with Hamas. Some were even involved in the atrocities of October 7. Israel will no longer grant automatic visas to OCHA's international staff. Visas will now be limited to 1 month's terms. What was will no longer be. Jonathan Whitehall, OCHA's head of office for the so-called territories, has consistently and outrageously demonstrated his bias and agenda against the State of Israel. He will not have his visa renewed, and he will leave the country by July 29th. Mr. President, at some point, enough is enough. Enough with the hypocrisy. Enough with the bias. Enough with the endless defamation campaign against the State of Israel. Israel is doing the job the UN was created to do. We are dismantling terror networks. We are protecting civilians. We are standing up for minorities under threat. While Israel fulfills this mission, many within the UN spend all of their energy, 24/7, trying to smear Israel, protecting its own biases, siding with the very actors that fuel the chaos. It is time to return to the UN's core purpose. Israel will continue to do what is necessary to protect our people, defend our borders, help our neighbors in need, and bring our hostages home. We invite the UN, finally, to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of Israel, for your statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to preside over this important open debate on the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. I thank Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khayari for his comprehensive briefing. For decades, the Palestinian people have endured the worst form of occupation and apartheid. They have been denied their fundamental and inalienable rights, including the right to self-determination and statehood. What we have witnessed in Gaza for the last 22 months is not just a humanitarian catastrophe, but a collapse of humanity itself. Gaza has become a graveyard for innocent lives as well as for the international law, particularly the international humanitarian law. Over 58,000 Palestinians, most of them women and children, have been killed in Israel's brutal military assault. The systematic targeting of hospitals, schools, UN facilities, aid convoys, and refugee camps are not incidental. These are deliberate acts of collective punishment in flagrant violation of IHL, numerous Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, as well as the binding provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice. Excellencies, the hunger crisis in Gaza has reached unprecedented and deeply alarming levels. According to the United Nations World Food Programme, a third of the population not eating for multiple days in a row, an indicator of catastrophic levels of food insecurity. Excellencies, the Palestinian question is a litmus test for the credibility of the United Nations, the Security Council, and the integrity of the international law. Failure to uphold the rights of the Palestinian people will embolden impunity and undermine the legitimacy of the very international order we all claim to defend and uphold. The Security Council must live up to its responsibility and ensure compliance with its own decisions. Pakistan reaffirms its unwavering and principled support and solidarity with the Palestinian people and their right to a viable, sovereign, and contiguous state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. This is the only just and durable solution enshrined in Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the consensus position of the OSCE. We urge the Security Council to pursue with unity and urgency the following concrete measures. First, an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and across the occupied Palestinian territory, including the full implementation of the Council Resolution 2735. We appreciate the ongoing diplomatic efforts aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza and hope these would yield tangible and meaningful outcomes, including a permanent end to the war. We appreciate the role played by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States in this regard. Second, unfettered, sustained, and secure humanitarian access to all civilians in need and the protection of aid workers, medical teams, and the UN personnel. Immediate steps should be taken to ensure the delivery of life-saving food and medical assistance, restore humanitarian supply lines, and prevent famine conditions from taking hold. Third, renewed and reinforced international support to UNRWA, which remains indispensable to the survival of millions of Palestinians. Fourth, an end to the forced displacement, illegal settlement expansion, and annexation of Palestinian land, particularly in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Fifth, implementation of the Arab and OIC-led reconstruction plan for Gaza, which represents a vital framework for post-conflict recovery and rehabilitation, sustainable development, and the restoration of dignity for the Palestinian people. And sixth and last, a political horizon is the need of the hour, the revival of a genuine and time-bound political process to achieve a just, comprehensive, and lasting two-state solution in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions. Pakistan welcomes the growing international momentum in support of the Palestinian statehood and full membership of the UN. We urge those that have yet to recognize the state of Palestine to do so as soon as they can. We also welcome the convening on 28th of July of the International Conference on the Two-State Solution, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France, to help generate renewed momentum and take concrete actions towards achieving the two-state solution. Excellencies, a comprehensive and enduring peace in the Middle East requires addressing all interrelated crises across the region through effective multilateralism and peaceful settlement of disputes. Pakistan supports the stabilization of Syria through an inclusive political process. Syria's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity must be upheld. Israel must withdraw immediately from the separation zone established under the 1974 disengagement agreement and from the occupied Syrian Golan Heights in accordance with Security Council resolutions 242, 338, and 497. In Lebanon, the ceasefire understanding and resolution 1701 must be respected and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon safeguarded. We must support the peace process in Yemen, facilitated by the UN and regional actors, particularly Saudi Arabia and Oman. The sharp rise in tension and violence as a result of Israeli aggression and unlawful military strikes in Iran was profoundly disturbing. These attacks set a dangerous precedent and pose grave threat to regional and global peace. Pakistan calls for urgent recourse to dialogue and diplomacy consistent with the UN Charter to find a peaceful and lasting resolution to this issue in accordance with the rights, obligations, and responsibilities of all parties. Excellencies, history has taught us that the use of force and unilateral military actions only deepen conflicts and entrench divisions with tragic human and humanitarian consequences. The way forward lies in upholding international law, ending foreign occupation, rejecting the use of force, and promoting solutions through dialogue and diplomacy. It is time to give the Palestinian people what they have been denied for too long: justice, freedom, dignity, and a state of their own. That is the path to durable peace and stability in the Middle East. I thank you all. I now resume my functions as President of the Council, and I will give the floor to the representative of Greece.
I thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to thank Assistant Secretary General Mr. Khaled Kiari for his detailed and insightful briefing. Mr. President, a lot has transpired in the volatile region of the Middle East since our last open debate in April, demonstrating the potential pitfalls in a part of the world where security can unravel in an instant. The recent cessation of hostilities between Iran and Israel has been a welcome development. It is now critical for IAEA inspectors to resume their activity, verifying the status of Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles and enrichment capabilities. We urge Tehran to abide by the JCPOA, return to the negotiations table, and uphold its commitments as part of the NPT. Volatility in the Red Sea region, a nodal maritime route, exposes the international community to acute security risks and economic uncertainty, jeopardizing global trade and supply chains. Underscoring the importance of immediately seizing all attacks against merchant ships, we reiterate our call for the full respect and implementation of the UN arms embargo against the Houthis by all. The core of regional tensions and turbulence lies where it all started on October 7, 2023, with the horrendous terrorist attack of Hamas on Israel. As discussed a week ago in this very chamber, for yet another time, a year and a half into this conflict, a severe humanitarian crisis has taken hold of the entire Gaza Strip, with the population facing conditions of distress and struggling to survive. We welcome the recent agreement between Israel and the European Union on scaling up humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza, as it provides some much-needed hope. The agreement demonstrates that dialogue with Israel can bear results. On this premise, we urge Israel to allow and facilitate the safe, unconditional, massive, and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid into the Strip. We expect the agreed steps to be implemented with a sense of urgency, allowing a substantially increased humanitarian aid to enter the Strip and opening the southern and northern crossings is imperative. Undoubtedly, to achieve this, the expertise of the United Nations, its agency network, and UNRWA remains invaluable. At the same time, we stress that any humanitarian plan must adhere to the core principles of international humanitarian law, cover all parts of Gaza, and support the existing humanitarian operations within the Strip. Israel's Gaza Humanitarian Fund plan falls short of this promise. As efforts led by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States to secure a much-needed ceasefire deal are ongoing, let us recall that hostages continue to suffer, held in captivity by Hamas for 19 consecutive months, having repeatedly condemned the October 7 terrorist attacks and the ongoing detention and inhumane treatment of hostages, we reiterate our demand for their immediate and unconditional release. We deplore the refusal of Hamas to hand them over. While conditions in Gaza remain dire, the security situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem also raises concerns. We condemn the escalation and the continued settler violence, the expansion of illegal settlements, and Israel's military operations. Settlement expansion is contrary to international law and the relevant Security Council resolutions, seriously undermining the prospects for a two-state solution. The repeated attacks on Taiba, one of the Christian majority villages in the West Bank, are particularly alarming. In the same vein, we express our deep sorrow for the tragic loss and casualties caused by the attack on the Catholic Church of the Holy Family in Gaza. Places of worship and religious sites should never be targeted. Mr. President, there is no military solution for Gaza. Greece, along with the United Kingdom and 27 international partners, recently came together with a simple yet urgent message. The war in Gaza must end now. The only solution for Gaza would be a political one. We thus look forward to the upcoming high-level conference on the implementation of the two-state solution under the co-chairpersonship of France and Saudi Arabia, hoping it will bring new impetus to the political process. In this spirit, Greece is ready to engage to bring the Arab plan, as presented by Egypt, forward, developing it further where necessary. The plan constitutes a constructive proposal for the day after, when an empowered and reformed Palestinian Authority will be able to exert effective governance in Gaza and the West Bank, without any government or security role for Hamas, and definitely without any forced displacement of Palestinians. All sides must now harness the necessary political courage to agree to a ceasefire, end the war, and pave the way toward a political process towards two states living side by side in peace and security. Turning over to Syria, ahead of our monthly briefing next week, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern over the continued violence in the Druze majority area of Shueida, resulting in hundreds of casualties, including civilians, with reports also of summary executions. We condemn all acts of sectarian violence, echoing the Secretary General's plea towards the interim authorities and local leaders to de-escalate. We also echo the call towards the interim authorities to transparently and openly investigate the incidents, holding all those responsible into account. Finally, yet importantly, Lebanon seems to be staying the right course, albeit not without significant challenges. Aware of UNIFIL's importance in preserving the cessation of hostilities and thus for the maintenance of regional peace and security, Greece fully supports the mission's mandate renewal. All parties need to fully abide by Security Council Resolution 1701 and the provisions of the November ceasefire understanding, contributing to the security of both Israel and Lebanon. Reaffirming our commitment to the preservation of Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity, we consider it imperative that we support the country's efforts to turn the page and the Lebanese government's efforts to extend its authority over the entire territory of Lebanon, while implementing much necessary reforms. We commend the progress of the Lebanese armed forces in the redeployment and bringing all weapons under state control, indicative of the Lebanese leadership's resolve in meeting its international obligations. Greece is steadfast in its commitment of support for the Lebanese institutions, including the LAAF. Mr. President, from Gaza and Syria to Lebanon and the Red Sea, the Middle East is being transformed before our very eyes. Greece will continue to support the role of the United Nations and this Council in monitoring the transformation of this volatile region, adding its voice in support of regional and international peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of Greece. I will now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Minister. We welcome your presidency of this quarterly open debate in the Security Council on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. And we would like to thank the Assistant Secretary General Khaled Kiari for his detailed briefing. Today, in the Security Council chamber, once again, we are hearing very worrying assessments of the tragic developments in the Middle East. And this is both in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well as within the context of broader regional developments. And the root cause for essentially all of the Middle East crises and collisions which create challenges for the security of many countries in the region is the fact that the Palestinian issue remains unresolved. Whereas the main parameters for the settlement of this is something that the international community agreed many decades ago. As a result, a growing number of Middle Eastern countries are beginning to forget what peaceful life without bombs, explosions, and threats of full-scale hostilities is like. Unfortunately, during the time elapsed since our previous debates on this, a spiral of escalation in the region has become intensified and pulled new states into it. In June, we all witnessed a very sharp military confrontation between Iran and Israel. It was accompanied by the Western Jerusalem strikes, with support of Washington strikes, on the nuclear facilities in Iran, the facilities which were under IAEA safeguards. These unjustified attacks are not just a gross violation of the UN Charter, but they also severely undermine the foundations of the nuclear non-proliferation regime. We strongly and unconditionally condemn attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Through this act of aggression, Washington and West Jerusalem pushed the region to the brink of a large-scale war, which could have had the most dire radiological consequences, not just for Iran, but also for all of the states in the Middle East. Despite the announcement made by the Trump administration there was a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, despite that, the situation remains very fragile. As a matter of principle, we do not share the concept of peace through strength, which is taken on by Washington. The long-standing issues in the regions cannot be resolved this way, and new waves of violence can only compound the difficulties. What is needed is looking for political and diplomatic solutions within the Middle East settlement, but also more broadly regarding all of the conflicts in the region. The attempts to cowboy-style put the squeeze on some actors and intimidate others create a short-term effect and cannot provide for a long-term balance of interest in this very difficult Middle East landscape. West Jerusalem should finally understand that it's impossible to change geography and that Israel would have to coexist with all of its neighbors. And for that, Israel needs to have at least a minimal level of trust between Israel and them. This cannot be done when there is a continued radical anti-Palestinian rhetoric, when there is a denial of the right of Palestinians to exist within their own state. But unfortunately, what we're witnessing now is exactly the opposite. We, for example, are very worried by what is being said by Israeli leaderships when they're announcing their intent to resolve the issue of OPT, in particular in Gaza, in one fell swoop. This is shored up by the provocative plans to fully annex the Strip, and this is also shored up by other provocative public steps. As recently as yesterday, in the Knesset, there was a conference entitled Riviera in Gaza, From Ideal to Reality. During that conference, the Minister of Finance, Smotrich, said that he discussed with the leadership of Tzahal the parameters of gradually absorbing the Strip through recreating illegal settlements in Gaza. In other words, we're talking about recolonization, reoccupation of Palestinian territory here. This is a monstrously cynical approach, which essentially dooms the Palestinians to either death or exile. The moral and political duty of the international community here is to make sure that these plans do not come to be. The very way of phrasing this issue this way is unconscionable, even hypothetically, because it implies that the Palestinians are second-class people and they're not masters of their own fate. For now, the IDF continues clearing up the strip regardless of the number of victims of the military operation. It's about 60,000 Palestinians who died, and regardless of the Palestinian infrastructure destruction. Daily we receive information about hundreds of new victims amongst the people in Gaza, including in food distribution places in the vicinity of the infamous Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is nothing else than a means of using humanitarian assistance as a weapon or for blackmail. For example, in the last 24 hours, 99 Palestinians died. 26 of them were lining up for rations. There are also indiscriminate strikes against religious facilities. On the 18th of July, there was an attack against the only Catholic Church of Holy Family in Gaza. According to the information we're getting, this was a direct hit against the church, as a result of which parishioners and the clergy were seriously wounded. We strongly condemn this kind of action. We're most seriously concerned by the fact that the people in Gaza do not have an opportunity of obtaining adequate medical assistance. Essentially, all of the medical infrastructure in the strip is destroyed. There are still shortages of all basic necessities: medicines, medical instruments, fuel, and even bags are needed for burial. Hospitals receive hundreds of patients daily, including children who are on the brink of death from starvation. According to the figures as of yesterday, in the past 48 hours, 33 people died from starvation. They're including 12 children. And these figures, as we all know, unfortunately will only grow. Malnutrition is something that doctors and nurses are suffering from as well. They cannot expect to receive adequate food under essential blockade of Gaza either. Mr. President, we are convinced that all those present here very well know the assessment issued by international humanitarian organizations and UN agencies of what is happening in Gaza. They're saying that it goes beyond what is acceptable even at war. In November 2023, the Secretary General stated that Gaza had become a huge children's cemetery. Recently, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Mr. Lazzarini, described the situation in Gaza as hell on earth. Such assessments are issued by all humanitarians without exception, all of those who are working in the sector or traveling to it. How does Israel react to all of that? We have heard that today after the permanent representative of the country essentially stated that they will be squeezing OCHA from the occupied territory, and there will be sanctions against its high-level representatives. We just need to find out now whether Washington is also going to be covering up for its allies without a murmur as well, whether they will support their new inhuman steps, which goes in counter to what in other instances they proclaim as to be human rights protection. How much longer will this terrible situation continue, which not only humiliates the Palestinians, but also undermines our own faith in the humanitarian ideals, humankind, and justice? Against the background of the disaster in Gaza, what is somewhat obscured is the situation on the West Bank. But unfortunately, this gives us equal reasons for worry because the military operation continues there, economic suffocation, and arbitrary arrest against the Palestinians, property expropriation, and demolition of houses. To this, we need to add the unconstrained violence by the settlers, very frequently under the lenient eye of the Israeli military, and the record pace of settlement construction, and at the same time an open declaration to annex the West Bank. This is part of the overall stance to destroy any kind of premise or an opportunity for Palestinians to have their own state, depriving them of the possibility to survive in the occupied territories. Can we really allow ourselves not to notice that and allow the Israeli policy of fait accompli the possibility of fully trample underfoot the international documents about a two-state solutions? Mr. President, the Russian approaches to the current situation in the OPT and in general to the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian settlement have been consistent and are based on obvious truths. We have consistently advocated in favor of an immediate and unconditional ceasefire and the release of all hostages and those who are forcibly detained, ensuring that there is safe and unimpeded humanitarian assistance, the relaunching of the peace process on the two-state basis, which would ensure the implementation of the legitimate aspirations of Palestinians. We need to always bear in mind the ultimate goal here, the creation of an independent Palestinian state and within the 1967 border with the capital in East Jerusalem, coexisting with Israel in peace and security. The attempts to put the Palestinian issue onto the back burner, including the issue of the historic injustice as regards the Palestinians' rights to self-determination and return, is one of the reasons there is a recurrence of violence not just in the Palestinian territories but in the region as a whole, as well as growth of extremism and terrorism. And the only way to overcome this is to consolidate the efforts of the international community on the basis of the universally acknowledged basis, with the main key element here two-state formula. Overall, the issues in the OPT and in the region have become so tangled that the international community needs, at a minimum, to have a very thoughtful and unblinkered discussion here on how to overcome that. What is particularly relevant in this situation is the International High-Level Conference in support of Palestine next week. We know the efforts made here by our French and Saudi co-presidencies to organize a conference, and it is our expectation that the conference will work out specific steps for the UN member states and international community, including steps to recognize Palestine and to protect the specialized humanitarian agencies, first and foremost, UNRWA. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of Russian Federation. I would now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Assistant Secretary General Khiari for his comprehensive briefing. Since our last open debate, the Middle East has continued to grapple with escalating conflict, humanitarian suffering, and tragic loss of life. From a devastating humanitarian situation in Gaza to the unprecedented military escalation between Israel and Iran in light of Iran's accelerated nuclear trajectory. From the resumption of Houthi attacks against commercial shipping in the Red Sea to their continuous attack against Israel and its subsequent responses. Most recently, the fighting in the Soweto province of Syria and Israel's strikes against Syrian territory. We must do all we can to prevent further escalation and a wider regional war. For stability to be restored in the Middle East, all parties must exercise utmost restraint and recommit to diplomacy. The situation is simply too fragile and too dangerous. Mr. President, we are convening today less than 1 week ahead of the high-level conference on the two-state solution, a conference that has the potential to advance concrete solutions for Israelis and Palestinians alike. It takes place against a backdrop of appalling levels of human suffering in Gaza, the continued agony of Israeli hostages and their families, and a further deterioration in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. We deplore the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, where the population has been squeezed into less than 14% of the territory. Their reality is one of imminent death by hostilities, starvation, or disease. A daily specter of not knowing what to fear the most, dying from starvation or from seeking food. Most recently, civilians in northern Gaza were attacked while seeking aid from a coordinated WFP convoy. We strongly condemn all attacks on civilians seeking to obtain humanitarian aid. This needs to stop. Denmark's position is clear. Civilians, including humanitarians and UN personnel, as well as civilian infrastructure, must be protected in accordance with international law. We are deeply concerned by Israel's new evacuation orders encompassing the UN compound in Gaza, as well as the recent attacks on a warehouse and facilities sheltering WHO staff. All UN premises are inviolable and must be protected. Humanitarian aid must flow freely, safely, and at scale into Gaza, in line with international humanitarian law. We have heard, time and time again, that the UN and its partners are ready to deliver. They must be allowed to do so. And the UN, including OCHA, has our full support. The vilification of UN organizations and rejection of visas for senior UN staff are in no one's interest. And until a two-state solution is realized, UNRWA continues to be uniquely mandated by the General Assembly to deliver essential state-like services to Palestine refugees. Denmark continues to call for an immediate and lasting ceasefire, and for the immediate, unconditional, and dignified release of all hostages kept by Hamas. We reiterate that Hamas can never be allowed to play a role in the future of Gaza. Mr. President, developments in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are further jeopardizing the prospects of a two-state solution. They must not be ignored. Denmark condemns the continuing acceleration of settlement construction and intensification of settler attacks against Palestinians. Just last month, Israeli settlers endured as many as 100 Palestinians, the highest monthly figure since OCHA began documenting casualties in 2005. We reiterate that all Israeli settlements are a clear violation of international law and call on the Israeli authorities to cease all further expansions and hold settlers accountable for their crimes. In this regard, we strongly oppose Israel's decision to assume the long-stalled E1 settlement expansion plan, which was add more than 3,400 new units and essentially cut the West Bank in two. We reiterate that resolutions of this Council, including 2334, are not merely words on paper. They must be fully implemented. Mr. President, in closing, as we look to the next week's high-level conference, it is critical for the international community to come together to advance concrete measures for the implementation of a two-state solution. This remains the only viable path to sustainable peace in the Middle East and a future where Palestinians and Israelis live side by side in peace and security. Meanwhile, we need to continue to work for de-escalation and lasting peace in the wider region. Denmark looks forward to contributing constructively to these ends. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Representative of Denmark. I would now give the floor to Representative of China.
Thank you, President. I welcome your presence, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Dar, and presiding over the meeting. I thank ASG Chiari for his briefing. For some time now, the Middle East has been mired in turmoil, with conflicts and confrontations escalating. The conflict in Gaza, dragging on for 21 months, has caused over 58,000 deaths and an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe. Israel's continued military attacks, restrictions on access to supplies, and the implementation of a militarized aid distribution mechanism have repeatedly led to heavy civilian casualties. Recently, Israel launched ground offensive against Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, attacked WHO facilities, and searched, interrogated, and even detained its staff. We strongly condemn these. Military means are not the right way to resolve issues. More killings will not bring lasting peace. China urges Israel to immediately cease all military operations in Gaza, fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law, fully restore humanitarian access, and support the UN and other humanitarian organizations in their aid effort. China firmly supports the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and USG Fletcher in their work. The country with significant influence over the party concerned should adopt an impartial and responsible approach and truly play a positive and constructive role. While the fighting in Gaza rages on, the situation in the West Bank is very tense. So far this year, settlement expansion and settler violence have killed over 600 Palestinians and injured over 5,000. The international community has repeatedly affirmed that settlement activities violate international law and council resolutions and must cease immediately. Israel should stop its attacks on the West Bank, curb settler violence, and conduct impartial investigations of all attacks and pursue accountability. President, elsewhere in the Middle East, the challenges to peace and stability are equally daunting. Israel's continued attacks on Syria and Lebanon and its illegal military presence have increased tensions. The sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Syria and Lebanon must be fully respected, and the relevant Security Council resolutions should be effectively complied with. The Syrian interim authorities should promote an inclusive political process and effectively implement the obligations under international law, including counterterrorism. The international community should help and support the Lebanese government in its active governance. We call on the Houthis to stop targeting merchant ships, and all parties concerned to exercise calm and restraint in order to maintain the safety of shipping lanes in the Red Sea. It has been proved that war cannot resolve the Iranian nuclear issue, and a political solution is the only way forward. All parties should ensure that the ceasefire reached between Israel and Iran is effectively implemented and prevent the situation from escalating again. The parties concerned should restart dialogue and negotiations on an equal footing and address their legitimate concerns through consultations. Iran's commitment not to develop nuclear weapons should be taken seriously, and all parties should fully respect Iran's right to the peaceful uses of nuclear energy as a state party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Relevant countries should abandon the practice of frequently resorting to threats and pressure, which will only intensify tensions and confrontations and even further undermine diplomatic efforts. President, lasting peace in the world would not be possible without a stable Middle East. The Middle East cannot remain under the shadow of conflicts forever, nor can its people continue to live in the insecurity of war. The question of Palestine lies at the heart of the Middle East issue, and the implementation of the two-state solution is the only viable way to resolving the question of Palestine. The international community must firmly reject unilateral actions that erode the foundation of the two-state solution and firmly oppose the dangerous attempts to annex Gaza and the West Bank. We welcome the high-level conference on the implementation of the two-state solution to be convened next week, and we look forward to its galvanizing strong momentum to the implementation of the two-state solution. I thank you, President.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of China. I would now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, let me first thank Pakistan for convening this open debate and express our appreciation to ASG Khaled Khiari for his sobering briefing. His words echo what every soul in this chamber already knows, what the world sees, and what history will not forget: the catastrophic suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank alike. What we are witnessing is not war. It is annihilation, not only of people, but of life itself. This is a plan, a cruel, a deliberate plan to erase a people, to wipe away their roots from their homeland. But, Mr. President, no matter how many bombs fall, no matter how deep the pain of the Palestinian people in Gaza, Palestine is not living. Palestinians are not living. They are the olive tree, burned, broken, but never uprooted. The Israeli occupation may seem powerful, militarily overwhelmingly powerful. But is it eternal? Justice, however, long delayed, always finds its way. And the day will come when this horrible occupation ends. Mr. President, humanity is bleeding in Gaza. In the last 600 days. But so too is the very idea of law, of morality, of justice, of conscience. International law is being trampled. Famine is being openly used as a weapon. Just yesterday, yes, just yesterday, 15 Palestinians died of hunger. The total is now 101, including 80 children. And these children are dying not from wounds, but from the silence of empty plates. In Gaza, famine is spreading like fire through dry land. It touches everyone. It affects everyone: doctors, nurses, journalists, humanitarian workers, UN staff. It affects everyone: children, mothers, the elderly. Yes, Gaza is starving. And the world, the international community, is only contemplating. And the Security Council is watching with no action. The cause is clear. The solution is well known. As Médecins Sans Frontières medical coordinator in Gaza said plainly, the starvation of people in Gaza is intentional. It could end tomorrow if Israeli authority allow food in at scale. But instead, aid convoys are blocked. Humanitarian centers are attacked. And the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I should say Gaza Hunger Foundation, has tragically become a death trap. A trap endangering the very lives of the starving Palestinians that it claims feeding. As one of 3 Gazans does not eat for days, aid is no more a race for life. It has become a race to death. More than 1,000 people killed, over 6,500 injured just for seeking help, just for seeking food, just for reaching out of bread. This is the blatant reality. As of today, almost 60,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli occupying forces, while more than 143,000 have been injured. We will not forget them. Those who have committed these crimes, yes, crimes, should not, cannot lecture us on morality, on respect of human dignity, on respect of international humanitarian law. If they are keen to know the reality in the enclave, they should allow access, free access in Gaza of journalists, human rights mandate holders, credible international NGOs to investigate and to report to the world on the real situation in Gaza. And today, humanitarian organizations are attacked not only in the enclave, but also in this chamber. UNRWA, OCHA, WFP, ICRC, WHO. No flag protect them anymore. No UN flag, no cross, no crescent, no dove. Why? They tell the truth about the horrible situation in Gaza. They are the witness of a genocide. Mr. President, a ceasefire is long overdue. Yes, yet this Council remains bound by silence. We must not wait for permission to end the slaughter of dreams. Let us declare a ceasefire, unconditional and permanent ceasefire, not as a gesture, but as a duty to what remains of our shared soul, our shared mandate in this Security Council. Let us shield the remnant of dignity from the dust of collapsing home in Gaza, from the cries of children buried under the rubble. Mr. President, this pattern is not limited to Gaza. In the West Bank, we are witnessing an alarming escalation. Israel has announced a plan for further expanding settlements, open step toward annexation, Settler terrorism has reached unprecedented levels. Palestinians are being pushed out of their lands, of their homes. Their villages are burned. Their trees are chopped. Their lives, their family lives, are shattered. Even the sacred is not spared. Settlers repeatedly assault Al-Aqsa Mosque and attacks churches. Now, the famous Ibrahimi Mosque is under threat. Algeria condemns in the strongest terms these attacks and this violation of international law. And while we speak of Palestine, while we reaffirm the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, to sovereignty over their land, while we advocate for the implementation of the two-state solution, the Knesset voted just today, not for peace, not for justice, but to claim what is not theirs. They call occupation sovereignty, sovereignty over the West Bank. What will the international community, what will this Security Council say this time? Another statement? Another immoral silence. President, to this barbarity, our answer must be enforcing respect of human rights, enforcing respect for human dignity. To starvation, our answer must be enforcing lifeline aid. To injustice, our answer must be the supremacy of law, enforcing the supremacy of law. And to the attempt to erase a nation, a Palestinian nation, our answer must be the establishment of a Palestinian state with Al-Quds Sharif as its capital. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative of Algeria. I now give the floor to Representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sierra Leone thanks the Presidency for convening this important and timely debate. The protracted crisis in the Middle East continues to demand the Council's urgent attention, principled clarity, and resolute action. I thank Assistant Secretary General Kerry for his detailed briefing. Mr. President, across the region, fragility remains a defining feature. While recent de-escalations in Lebanon and between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel offer some measure of relief, other theaters remain dangerously unstable. Nowhere is this more pronounced than in the Syrian Arab Republic, where the resurgence of violence has taken a devastating toll. We reiterate our call for full respect and implementation of the 1974 Disengagement of Forces Agreement between Israel and Syria. All parties must uphold the ceasefire, exercise maximum restraint, and refrain from actions that could further destabilize the region. In this regard, we recall the primary responsibility of the Syrian authorities to ensure the safety and protection of all civilians, including religious and ethnic minorities. This responsibility is not only a matter of national duty, but a legal obligation under international, humanitarian, and human rights law. Turning to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, the scale and depth of human suffering in Gaza over the past months